At Alfa Romeo's design centre, Centro Stile, an idea is born. The initial idea is revised and improved over and over again, each step taking it closer to perfection. This will be the new Alfa 75. At the moment, it's just a pile of
rusty
before being handed over to skilled craftsmen to produce a full-size mock-up of the car from such mundane materials as hessian, chalk and iron pipes. The idea, now encoded on the tape, is divided into its structural components and evaluated for any gains that can be made in the areas of strength, efficiency or ease of manufacture. Not a millimetre of the new 75 structure escapes this minute scrutiny of its construction. It is a complex process using the latest in computer technology to visualize the new car's structures in a three-dimensional form, allowing the technicians to make any necessary design changes and test them on the computer, rather than having to make a possibly flawed vehicle and then test its limitations.
Welcome to the first in a 4,000 part mini-series on the restoration of my Alfa Romeo 75. You may ask, why am I watching a pair of hands sort through rusty old bolts? Well, I figured this was a good place to start and gives me a bit of time to introduce this beautiful 80s brutalist box on wheels. First arrived with me back in early 2014, I think. Where I drove the car for about 100 yards from a trailer of the previous owner that he delivered it on, all the way into a parking space in a shared car park, much to my neighbour's delight. However, this running, driving situation was short-lived, as just after parking it up, I recorded this short clip. Only to realise that the water pump bearing had completely gone, and the pulley looked more like a precarious spinning plate than, a true running pulley. The vigilant, mechanically minded of you might have also noticed the various shades of exhaust smoke. The history of the car, let alone the engine, was a little foggy, so I took the executive decision on that day to start stripping the engine down to avoid any temptation, really, to start it back up and listen to that lovely V6 burble again. And so began the 8-year journey from then to now. Unfortunately, none of this was documented on video, partly due to time constraints, where I was on borrowed time when working on the car, due to young children, work, and life in general. Perhaps I'll do a flashback clip at some point to fill in this horrendous time gap from when I purchased the car to where we are now, and all the various stalling points on the project. But for now, back to the rusty bolts in hand. Whilst filming this piece, one of the first deliveries for parts for sorting out the Alfa turned up. This is first delivery from rust.co.uk. This is their, I believe it's a starter kit they call it. It's just a mix of chassis epoxy paint, some cleaning stuffs, and this FE123 rust converter I've heard recommended. I also got a couple of, I forget what you call them now, but the paint and rust removal wheels for an angle grinder, and that's safety glasses. The because my regular glasses aren't fantastic at keeping the grit out of my eyes. Now, back to where we were. Get all that stuff out of the way. Some rusty bolts. So these actually sat in the boot of the car whilst it had been stored for me in the elements, unfortunately, and due to the unique way in which the chassis and body panels have adapted over the years under the elements, water had got into the boot, into a plastic box, which unfortunately didn't have a lid, filled up with water and submersed all of these bolts. So it's a mix here of stainless bolts, which I'd bought to replace various mild steel objects from the car as I'd taken them off, matching up thread pitches and lengths and things and ordering them in. But due to the fact, here they are, due to the fact that it's sat in rusty water with rusty bolts, they were pretty murky as well, so gave them the same treatment as the mild steel. So this is a rather arbitrary mix of citric acid. This is just is actually food grade citric acid. Not that that makes any difference really. It's just it's fairly pure. This will etch into the metal. It will start to erode the metal as well if you leave it long enough. But it's not strong enough to erode it away too quickly. So a good 24 hours and you'll see some decent results in taking the rust off of these bolts. And because they were kind of deep sea levels of rust in places, I thought I'd give the lot a good treatment. Unfortunately, in this batch of bits and bobs were also some brand new parts, which also unfortunately saw the untimely end of a rusty box. But here you can see it all bubbling away. So, rusty bolts are no longer rusty, or at least only surface rust, we would hope, on the mild steel. I'm going to have to sort those bolts out as well. On to the next stage of the project, which is going to be probably the main part for the foreseeable future, which is rust repairs. There's going to be a fair list, I'd imagine. This car's been set up, which usually means the rust is going to be in weird places you would normally see on a car, where water's been trapped whilst it's been sat. Hopefully not too serious. Likely going to need some help with that from some professional welders. Another point that came around was the electrical system needed some rewiring after some misplaced terminals. Meant that the starter wiring was shorted, melted away in a connector. So expect that in this video soon. And then once we've got that sorted, I think maybe we'll test everything, see what works and what needs fixing. One thing I've struggled with these sorts of projects, and with people I've worked with really, is I need to stay positive. I just if I start to feel negative about things just don't get done. So thought I'd write myself a little reminder. We'll keep that one on the board. Okay, so massive amount of citric acid with lots of rusty crap in it now. So I had to devise a way of rinsing that through, diluting the solution around the bolts so that they can be rinsed off and then dried. Thankfully, nice hot weather in the UK right now, so the drying part was fine. I had to improvise a rinsing station here, so here's a 5 litre bottle of screen wash. And drilled some holes in the cap, made a little inspection hatch at the top, dumped the bolts in, and I'm just purging the solution with water from a hose. And this is nicely rinsing away all the loose crud on the bolts as well. So this worked quite well. and mix these through. This is, I think this is just the mild steel stuff. The stainless, I did actually do in a bucket before I improvised this bottle, but this was probably a better way of doing it, if I'm honest, and these were by far the worst. You can see all of the rust, dirt, and flaky paint that's come up at the top there. It's not a great way of cleaning stuff because obviously when you skim it out, that stuff's going to come with it. So I had to rinse it a few times to get all this clear. Here's the stainless in the bucket. That's come up nice. There's a few pieces where bolts were buried at the bottom of the tubs, but I'm not too worried about that. I was mostly just into it to clean them off, the majority. A lot of this actually just wiped clean off. It's just like a very, very fine surface rust, and the solution had done a nice job of loosening it all up. So, you know, a bit of a buff with a rag and they look nice and shiny stainless again. I'm not sure what's happened with these. It looks like maybe I've taken nickel plating off of some parts, but I don't know. They're not expensive anyway. I'll keep a hold of those, but if I'm going to put any stainless fittings back on, I'll probably get some new washers. And yet some more rinsing. I tipped the tub over at this point so that this little inspection hatch would flood over. That way all of the crap that was floating to the surface would run off into the drain instead of being trapped. Here's the results of the stainless. Because it was quite a hot day, all I did was run it on an old t-shirt, let the sun dry them. I kind of accepted that anything that's steel without any kind of nice electrocoating is going to have some surface rust again, but it's nowhere near as bad as what it was when I found it. And yeah, if I feel that way inclined, maybe I'll etch these back and then immediately electroplate them. Maybe nickel plate, zinc plate or something. If there's any bolts there that can't just be replaced with new parts, to be honest. Because the amount of effort involved in electroplating, unless it's something specific, is probably a waste of time and money. Not sure where these washers came from, but they look highly specific. I think that's a hose mount for maybe power steering hose under the bonnet, just to tuck it away from belts. A few other odd bits. I'm pretty sure that's a part of the gear linkage. It's a bush for the gear linkage, or at least part of the bush. Like a battery tray bracket. This is the hammer that I dropped into the tray. You can just see the effect of the acid etching there. It's taken away the top layer of pretty much everything that's going on there. Should have stuck the whole hammer in if I had room, really. I'm sure there'll be plenty more of this to come. Clean the rest of the hammer up, and all the rest of the tools for that matter. So this is the results tubbed up with the stainless, now sorted. And there's all the rusty mild steel stuff and some odds and sods in a box. So that's not sure why I ticked off. I mean, I need the space, so we'll wipe that back off. And next we'll clean up the poly bushes that also got rusty. Yeah, I know.